Hey guys, JSHomecook, home cooking channel. Today I want to show you how to make a stock out of what's called a stewing hen. And a stewing hen is just an old laying hen that isn't producing anymore. And so what they'll do is they'll take these old laying hens and slaughter them and then sell them as stock hens or stew hens. Because their meat tends to be a bit tough and it isn't ideal for roasting or anything like that, they're typically viewed as less desirable, and because they're less desirable, they're also less expensive. And that's why I like using them, because you get a lot of meat from them that you can use for other things, as well as a bunch of really good stock, which you can also use for a lot of things. So I'll show you how to make a stock with one of them, and eventually I'll put out some videos of stuff you can do with the meat. And there they are in the store. As you can see, they're not very popular. I like to buy them when they go on sale. I'll pick up a bunch. You can see they're on sale now, and they're not very expensive at all. And you'll get a bunch of meat out of them and also a bunch of stock. So here we go. Here's one of the ones I had in my freezer. And this first step here is probably unnecessary, but I just like doing it, so I do it. And that's rinsing the bird off to get rid of all that extra myoglobin. That's the stuff that gives steak its color when it's rare. Anyway, when you're making a stock and you have myoglobin in the stock pot, what'll happen is it'll coagulate and kind of turn into that scuzzy foam stuff that you have to skim off, or so they would have you believe. So I just find this preliminary step of giving it a rinse seems to help with that. You'll still have to skim, but you won't have to skim as much. And to be honest, I'm not convinced that skimming is entirely necessary anyway. And if you're wondering why I sound different, it's because I recorded the first couple minutes earlier today. Anyway, I like rinsing the bird until the water comes away clear or starts looking to be a bit clear. You don't have to do it that much or at all. Maybe, I don't know. I'm sure even just a little bit of a rinse will make a difference. Just when you go through the bird, make sure you check inside it to make sure there isn't like a plastic cage or paper bag filled with a neck or gizzards or anything like that. Oftentimes there will be one of those, so, just have a look, make sure. Remove if necessary. Once your bird is rinsed, find your stock pot, fill it with water. But you knew that already, didn't you? Once you have your pot filled and you have it on the stove top, this part is kind of important. You want to bring the water up to a boil slowly. Don't crank the heat. Unless you have one of those stock pots with the slotted insert, then it's fine. Crank it. The reason you don't want to turn up the heat to too high of a temperature is because it'll start burning the chicken, and then you'll get little scorch marks at the bottom of your pot. So to avoid that, stick with a lower temperature. I'd say somewhere around medium, and make sure you come around every once in a while to turn the bird around. And that'll help prevent any scorching of the skin on the bird or in the bottom of the pot. And as the water gets up to temp, the bird will release the foam from the myoglobin like that. And you can just come around with a little thing to skim it off, a spoon, a ladle, whatever you have. I have that little tiny little sieve thing. But I've also found it actually works very well to just use a large ladle or a wide serving spoon and just take off the whole top layer of liquid and put it in a measuring cup, and then take the foam out from the measuring cup. And then you're able to get more of the foam off more easily because you're working with less surface area. But really it depends on how much you care about this foam. I personally don't think this foam is that much of an issue. I don't worry about it too much. I just skim off a bit with that little sieve thing I have and leave it at that. If you care about the foam, however, one of your options is you could just bring the chicken up to a simmer, and then after about 5-10 minutes, dump the water out and give the bird a little rinse again, and then bring it back up to a simmer with fresh water. Some people do that. Personally, I think that's a waste of, a good starting base for your stock, but, people, you do what you want. Once you've taken care of your foam, just cover the stock pot and let the bird simmer for a couple of hours. This here was probably about after an hour or so, and I just came and Gave it a little flip around. As you can see, the carcass will start floating after a bit. The carcass will be ready for pulling between 2 and 3 hours. 2 will be pretty firm for the meat, and 3 will be, I think, starting to approach that pulled-like consistency. I typically like something around the 2.5 mark, but I was a bit rushed when I was taking the footage for this, so I pulled it at the 2-hour mark. 2 hours will give you meat that is, palatable. You'll be able to eat it, but it will be firm. So, if you don't want it to be too firm, let it go a little longer. After the hen is cooled enough, you're on to the next step, and that is just grabbing pieces of chicken, pulling off the meat, and putting the bones back into the stock pot. It takes a little while. It's all right. It's a nice little task for being alone with your thoughts. It is a little messy, though. You also want to put the skin back in the pot as well. Like, that skin isn't worth keeping for eating. It's not going to crisp up into anything nice, so just put that back into the stock as well. I also don't worry too much about little pieces of meat that are on the bone. Like, I don't try and pick the bones clean. That'll add flavor to the stock too, those little bits of meat, so stuff like that will just go straight back into the pot as well. The neck as well. On the carcass, there will be little pieces of really fatty meat, and I actually like keeping that because it has a lot of good flavor, so that stuff I keep. Just be careful because you can find little bits of cartilage or very thin bones in some of that stuff, so just be on the lookout for that. Be judicious when you're picking through it. It's not great when you bite into a bone like that. And as far as uses for this meat is concerned, you can do a lot of things with it. You can put it in wraps, or I like using it to top salad. You can put it back into soup, which is something I don't normally do. It's good for making chicken salad if you like chicken salad. It does tend to be a little bit on the drier side, or the white meat is at least. But there's a lot of great ways that you can prepare the meat from this and still have a meal that you enjoy. I do have a video coming up to show you one of those methods, and that'll be coming out soon. So definitely come back for that if you want to do this but aren't really sure what you want to do with the meat. But once you're done picking through all the carcass and separating the meat from the bones and getting the bones back in the stock pot, take the stock pot, put it back onto the heat, or maybe you just kept it on the heat all this time. You'll continue simmering that for another few hours. You could probably go pretty well as long as you want here, another 8 hours, 12 hours. I'll usually go for at least another 4, but you can go as long as you want. If you try this and you go for like 12 hours, let me know how the stock goes, because I don't usually go past like 6 hours or so. By that point, I feel like it's pretty adequate, but I'm curious. Let me know. Once you feel like you've continued simmering those bones long enough, come on in with a skimmer or a slotted spoon or whatever you've got, and get those bones out of there. And at this point, you basically are done. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to concentrate this stock to reduce the amount of storage space it takes or enhance its flavor a little bit. But if you wanted to call it here, you totally could, and this would be a good stock. But if you are wanting to concentrate your stock, just return it to the heat once the bones are removed and let it reduce till you're happy. After that, we're all in the same step. You have to let your stock pot cool, and once it's cooled to a safe temperature, run it through a sieve. And I realize I say safe temperature while my stock pot is steaming like that. I swear I did probe it. It was still warm, but not like burn you warm, right? It was like 135 or something. But you can see why I use the sieve there. That helps get rid of all these little fragments and particles that are suspended in the stock, resulting in a more refined product. Once your stock has cooled completely to room temperature, you can put it in plastic storage containers like we do. We buy these big yogurts and we keep the containers and use them for everything. I don't know if that's really safe, microplastics, all the rage these days, who knows? But that's what we do. You can use glass or whatever you have. My only advice is if you do plan on making a stock with one of these stewing hens, plan ahead and make sure you actually have containers to store all the stock you're going to get from that bird. And that can also be a good reason to concentrate your stock. At any rate, there you go. That's how you make stock, and you can use this stuff for anything. It's good to make rice, soup, risotto, anything you want really. And like I said, in a few days I'll come at you with a video on what I like to do with the meat from one of these stewing hens. This here is one of my favorite things to do. Can you guess what it is? If not, that's okay. You'll find out in a few days. That's the video though, so thanks for watching. Hope to see you again. Bye for now.